Hey, my friends, how are you? Thanks for tuning in. Today, we're going to talk about hosteling in New York and hotels. We did a previous video about the legality of Airbnb in New York, and now this is kind of like a good transition to go into a another topic which I think is really important for like the tourism industry in New York, zoning in New York, and just all around housing situation in New York that this sort of like short term stays and hosteling could provide a niche. There's definitely a demand. So let's pull this up to give you some context about the whole history of this in New York. Maybe about 6, 7 years ago, so it's 2000, let's say 2014, 13. Lots of hostels in New York, tons of them, hundreds of them. Okay, big, small, officially run, unofficially run, B&Bs, things like that. Um, but there was a big crackdown. They closed, I think, 80, 90% of them. They changed the laws to grandfather in a few. So there's like one called like the High Hostel in Amsterdam. Sorry, when I say Amsterdam, Upper West Side on Amsterdam Avenue, kind of by Columbia. So there's certain situations where it's grandfathered in. They all changed no commercial hosteling in New York City, right? So let's look at this. There's a couple bills that were turned down quite a bit. There's a lot of lobbying in New York that happens in the hotel sector. Huge hotel lobby. Hotels are quite expensive in New York. There's also a lot of unions involved with the hotel industry, a lot of laws. But basically, long story short, they cracked down on illegal hostels. So there's a very few amount of them. This is around 2010. And so basically the rule is that if one, it has to be a non-for-profit. Two, it was grandfathered in. Three, the one thing is that they didn't want to have more than three unrelated people in a room at once. So three not non-consenting, but they're not related to each other. Like three people who are related can live there, but three who are not, no bueno. That's against the rules. This also has to go back towards flopping laws way back in the day in New York City, where there'd be a lot of transient communities migrating through New York. It's one of the biggest immigrant hubs in the country and the world. So there's a lot of like antiquated laws from that. Second is safety, managing these buildings with people coming and going. One, for fire. Number two, for sanitary reasons, for bed bugs and just in general. And to maintain order for these buildings, okay, right? And if, as you know, in New York, it's illegal to rent a residential building or a residential unit for under 30 days unless you are the owner of that building and you are sleeping in one of the units or one of the if it's a two-family, one of the units. If it's a large space, one of the bedrooms. So this has changed. So now there's not a lot of hostels, but there's a huge demand, right? There's still a huge demand for them. If you take a look at our pricing in New York, I mean, hotels are minimum 150, right? So a lot of younger travelers who are used to hosteling in European countries or Southeast Asia can't afford to come to New York. And this affects all the small businesses who surround hosteling, tour guides, more budget eateries. Certain neighborhoods could really benefit from having this type of traveler come and spend money. And a big proponent of this as well is obviously Airbnb changed the game. Number two, one, it's legal. Number two is that high-end hostels have become very in and very trendy, and part of the reason is because you have a lot of 30-somethings without kids traveling, and they have enough money to not stay in a traditional hostel that's kind of, there's a movie, there was a horror movie to murder people at a hostel. It's called Hostel, and just this unsanitary part, but they like the social part. So There's been a recent uptick in other countries, South America, Colombia. I've stayed at a few of them. They're great, where it's like high-end hostels. So you have a nice bed, privacy. Everything's furnished a little bit nicer, cleaner. There's some amenities. They're actually quite popular in places like Denver, and Breckenridge is a really nice one. Where else did I stay? Austin, Texas has quite a few. New York, Chicago, amazing ones, amazing ones. But in New York, there's a lot of opposition to it. Hotel lobby, and then also the zoning of these buildings, right? So M1 zoning, which are commercial buildings, can be office space or hotels. The shared space is getting quite saturated, and there's only a few players. The margins aren't as good as maybe they'd like. Now, some of these smaller buildings, if they could do hostels, for instance, say they had 20, 30 units, that's not profitable enough to make it a real hotel, right? But if you make it a hostel, you could turn a profit on this. So this is where there's a need there to put hosteling in the talks again for New York, especially with Airbnb being illegal. So there's a lot of holdup about this. And then in terms of other investment coming in, there's a lot of companies who are like this one. They've actually changed to Generator Hostel, right? So they have Miami, and this is their whole angle, is these high-end hostels. They're quite nice, emphasizing community, usually have a bar or restaurant involved with it. So there's a lot of interest in the American market that is being lost in New York. So if you're involved in that, or you're a investor or owner, this is something that is a way to profit on your building. So there's definitely a huge need for this here. And I really would like to hear what you'd like to think. Do you think with this new generation of older millennials or people who choose to spend money on experiences rather than lodging, the younger generation, is there a big market that New York's missing out on because it's illegal? I'd be really interested to hear what you think. Have you stayed at one of these hostels in New York? I've stayed at some. There's a really nice one, I think it's called the Q in Long Island City, that are legal. But if there was more clarity on the laws, maybe this would be a big industry in New York that could profit budget travelers, could profit the landowners, and local businesses around these places. Because if you're staying in a hostel, sometimes it's kind of a all-inclusive experience, and then you have other piggybacking services towards restaurants around it that'll benefit. So I hope you enjoyed this one. This one is one for the books. If you like it, subscribe on YouTube. Follow me on social media. DM me if you have any questions. I'd like to hear from you. Talk to you soon. Bye. Marcus Amadeus, that's what they said.